Welcome to our final panel of A2IM Indie Week, presented by Sound Exchange. We hear everybody was really anticipating the subject matter of this panel, Playlisting Plus, and we're really excited to have our panel on board today. Before we continue, I'd like to make a few announcements, again thanking our sponsors, BuzzAngle, CI, Reaperbahn, 1RPM, Pandora, Merlin, Mitchell Silverberg and Nup, LLP, Fox Rothschild, Inc., and Billboard. And now, without further ado, to get into Playlisting Plus, we're going to announce our speakers. Our panelists today are Simon Wheeler of Beggars Group, Doug Ford of Spotify, Eliah Seton of ADA, and Rob Abelow of Roll Call Records and Management. We are thrilled to have our moderator, Alan Kovac, of 11/7 Music Group and 10th Street Entertainment. Playlisting Plus.
Been between the two young guys.
Hello. When I was asked to host this panel, one of the opportunities I thought that we could have is getting an old guy like me and some of these other guys and getting some young guys who are changing the business. And one of the things I've said to A2IM, Merlin, AIM boards is we need to bring more young people into what changes our business. We've got a lot of old people on boards, on committees. Join a committee, get involved, listen to what's going on. We have access, you can get access, but you got to be a part of it. So music labels on the independent side are entrepreneurs. And the theme of A2IM's week is to teach entrepreneurs about the business. And we have a terrific panel to do that, multiple different kinds of labels. We have Spotify, and we have a global distributor. Eliah, I've known for a while. He has a Harvard master's degree.
Wow.
I find that to be exceptional in the music business.
I want to sit somewhere else.
I've known Doug in and out of many businesses, but he's a musician, had a label, was involved with Hit Predictor, which was data for radio, and he's now a global curator for Spotify. And I just met Rob. Rob has a background similar to mine. He was a promoter, became a manager, and out of the need to support his artists, became a record company. And I think he'll have a lot of insight to labels that don't understand those worlds and how that can really work with a global platform like Spotify. So the first question I was going to have for the panel is, we are changing from a local radio B2B marketing to mass audiences to a global B2C streaming business. And that is a huge change that we have to, as indies, really embrace. We're not going to compete with major labels at radio. We can when we have a hit, but they have catalogs, they can go 0 for 200 and keep swinging. We miss enough times, we are not going to get back up to bat. What streaming allows us to do is to have data, and data can tell you a lot of things, and we'll get into that. And my first question to everyone is going to be, how do you use data in your marketing, your A&R, the development of your platform, label, distribution company? No one wants to answer it. That's amazing. Why don't you try, Eliah?
Yeah, sure, I'll jump in. Data obviously is, can everybody hear me? Can you hear me in the back? Data is incredibly important to help make smarter A&R and marketing decisions. ADA, we're a global distributor, indie distributor, and we're trying to help our independent partners, whether they be labels or artists, make their dollars go farther. So it doesn't replace a creative process. I think it makes you much more efficient in your creative process and allow you to drive, I guess, more efficiency with every dollar that you spend. But data for the sake of data is just noise. I think you need to be precise about what you're looking at. Spotify and Doug, I'm sure will talk a lot about this, provide a lot of access to metrics that really help you refine what you're looking at. I think another critical point, Alan, that you raised in teeing up the question is, this is not kind of about a local approach, but it's really about a global approach. And when you are considering what metrics to look at, you have to be doing it on a global basis. In a streaming environment, the world has no borders. If your artist is not finding traction in a certain place, that artist might find traction in a completely different place, and you might be able to get very valuable insights from playlists in a completely different region or market or set of consumers that you would never have otherwise been looking at, and then take that set of data and go knock on Doug's door and try to get on a bigger playlist, the next tier of playlists. But you need to be precise about what you're looking at and focus on the globe.
Now, I think from a label's perspective, it's being able to manage and ingest and handle this fire hose of data that we're getting from all of our partners on a global level is probably the biggest challenge that we're all sort of scratching our heads about how to do it best. And then once we've got it, working out what it actually means. I think it's like too early at the moment to say, well, this is how we do and it's going to give us the answer X, because actually there isn't an answer X, but it should just give us some insights which help guide some of your decision-making process. But I think if you're working directly with services, which I think more and more people are nowadays, or you have access to the APIs that's coming out of the services, I mean, that's just a huge, huge challenge, with literally billions of lines of data that you need to try and get something salient out which makes sense, which you can communicate with either to your other business partners or back to the service which gave it to you, which is always a good conversation, or just going to the manager and trying to explain what this means. I mean, I think when we're talking about sales before, everyone goes, well, we sold 50,000, 100,000 albums, and everyone seems to know what that means, although I'm not quite sure that they did. But when you go to someone and say, actually, we've had 5 million streams, you say, well, what does that mean? Is that good? Is that bad? Is that indifferent? How do these streams build? Where are they? So I think being able to interpret things is something that's a bit of a new skill, which I'm sure pretty much everyone in this room is trying to get their head around at the moment. And it's certainly no different with us, but it's certainly fascinating, some of the insights we're getting. And I think as time goes on, as we live with this data longer and get a better feel for what it means, I think we're going to be able to get some more valuable insights in time.
I think what's interesting is, when you're measuring data before, if it's raw sales numbers, that's kind of a lump number, but we're actually able to measure engagement now. So a few years ago in A&R, it was interesting to look at, social media and the engagement rather than just raw numbers that artists are having with certain fans. So now you can actually do that on the sales and listening platform with Spotify, and seeing over and over how many times people are listening to tracks and where they're listening to them and where it's an engaging community.
I had an opportunity to meet Doug from the standpoint of data. We didn't know a lot of the curators around the world, but we were able to get on a playlist of 258 people in the UK. It's a great story because what we were able to do, we invested in a data scientist, and he was able to crunch the data and show something that looked like a hockey stick in a graph. And sent it over to Doug. He looked at it, sent it to his curators around the world, and we have an act we've been developing and percolating for over a year on Spotify that now has been in France and on television, toured in the UK, had a #1 in Canada, went top 20 here. What do you look at when you're looking at something like that? Because I'll be honest with you guys, I didn't have a clue what I was looking at. I just saw a hockey stick. What do you look for?
The data discussion could literally take up 2 hours right now. So,
That's why I wanted to.
we like to think of, Eliah hit on this, we like to think that we're kind of data-supported instincts in the curation team. So I'm going to call out Charlie Watt, because he's famous for saying gut over data. And I always like to correct that phrase with, gut-supported data and data-supported gut. So we pay attention to everything on a granular level within our playlist, from skips, saves, shares, to regional data. Songs live or die in playlists in all different contexts based on this information. The idea is that we want to break records. We want wide breaking of music in Spotify. We've intentionally built a massive array of different contexts, genre, moods, moments, to be able to facilitate that and watch how songs perform using data in different areas of the world and different areas of music consumption. We always are very reticent to front load music. We like to kind of bake songs in our network of playlists. Even in the top level genres, you may notice in the product that we built a thing we call the syndicate, which is a hierarchy that's built very much on a radio network philosophy. We even decided to call out the phrasing and the vernacular radio by calling them early bets, crossovers, and recurrence and golds. Underneath those, there's a series of feeders, which are niche and regional. The idea is that we plant songs in all of these different niche regional feeders or an early bets playlist, and we look at the performance of those songs, and they can then graduate up to more amplification within that network. Imagine that across every region of the world, with an editor using their ears and using their cultural knowledge and using their relationships with all of you, and the excitement of the music that they think is going to work in all these different contexts, paying attention to this on their own networks of playlists that are regionally specific and global, and that's what feeds our system. So we are constantly, like Alan mentioned, I founded a company called Hit Predictor that we did online song testing with 500,000 people, and we would get information to help labels and artists and managers predict what song would call out best at radio once they got on radio. It took us a week or two to get the data, and it takes radio, I don't know how many weeks to get caller research. We get that on every single song in Spotify in literally 24 hours. We can have enough information to start to clue the team in. I told you I could talk about this for 2 hours, I'm sorry. Throw out the question. We use that information every single day to support the gut decision that each editor is using within that playlist, whether it's a New Music Friday early bets playlist or a coffee house playlist or a lean back or putting people to sleep. If you're waking people up in a sleep playlist, the data is going to show it, so you got to chill out. And then we use that information to incubate and bake all these songs, and we're online globally 24 hours a day sharing stories of success with each other. So I was just talking to John Stein. He does a lot of our indie curation in the US, and he put it perfectly. He's like, you don't die if you don't have playlisting within our team. It's not live or die because of a playlist. It is really imperative that everybody realizes that. Sometimes getting added to a huge playlist can super burn a song really quick. Sometimes it's a miracle and it will just take off. But it's important, there's a cycle, and I'm going to get to that really quickly. It's important that we look at when you're not playlisted, that humans can't scale. So we always use data in Spotify and other products like Discover Weekly, Release Radar that are personalized and algorithmic to have mass consumption data as well, that then if we don't get a call from you about the record that's taken off in Norway, for example, the mass consumption will start to show pockets of interesting songs. And that super informs the curation team, which then amplifies that through Spotify, drives more taste profiling and more user consumption habits, which then in turn informs Discover Weekly and algorithmic programming, which the cycle just starts all over again. So, and that's just one portion of the data, discussion that I could get into.
So it's really in the hands of the consumer when you're using that algorithm. So it's no longer program director, play my record.
Yeah.
It's how am I, the label, an artist, engaging with that fan?
Yeah.
And then how do I become sticky enough for them to make a decision to put it on a playlist and become the soundtrack to people's lives? That's the insight. The insight is it takes a long time to percolate. It could take a year, like we were talking about that artist. It doesn't take 4 weeks. It doesn't take 8 weeks or 12.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
I think it's almost overwhelming how much is available. When you think about how it's a 24/7 cycle. There's never a holiday. You're never taking a break. So being very specific about what you're looking for is critical, and not having your sights set on starting at the top. You could get added to Rap Caviar, and a week later, the data shows your team that's not working, and then it's all over. I think it's having the patience to go through that cycle is critical. I also think simply having visibility across the globe around volume of streams is really important. One of our big partners at ADA is BMG, and BMG has had great success with the artist LP. So an American artist, she had a single, Lost on You, which about a year ago now we saw was starting to gain a lot of traction on streaming services in Greece. Nothing specific about the track or the artist would have indicated Greece. And then the next domino to fall was Italy. And then it started to run through continental Europe. By Christmas, we shipped a gold record in France that ended up going platinum, and that was before any story started in her traditional strong markets, the UK or the US, and only now is that story beginning to be told there. That's a year later. So that visibility and being able to see where there's traction and then pounce is hugely valuable.
If I could just sort of go back to the sort of like the curation point and breaking artists, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here a little, but I think if we have the comparison with radio, and I think the data which is being produced and the analysis which is happening now, it's almost like a turbocharged, radio sampling type of world that we're in here, and clearly that sort of like that radio type of sampling model has never really worked very well for independents and the music which we produced, because I think things do take a bit more care and a bit more placement, and having people to come out and put their cards on the table and support this artist or support this track and really help build the story, so that it gets the right reaction once it sort of gets onto these radio playlists. And I think some of the dangers that we're seeing with too much data sort of driving a lot of these actions in the mass, because you can't really dive in and look at each individual artist and each individual track to be able to do that. So I think there's a real danger that actually you can, as you say, burn out a track. But if it's not placed in the right way and it's not supported and it's not nurtured in that way, which we all want from our music. So I think that's one of the dangers which kind of we see with some of these models. And I think having this radio-like model when everyone's kind of talking in radio language actually has some real concerns, because there becomes a limit to where we can get to, with a lot of the artists that we all work with. So I think that's something, which we're trying to work out how best we can interface and break our artists through these sort of roofs that we see in place, And, this isn't, at Spotify specifically, this is just about a data-driven world that we're in, because sometimes, you really want people to come out and take their gut bets and go, actually, I kind of don't care what the data says, because I believe if we can set this up, if we can work this well, if we can get this to the right audience, then it will work, but maybe we've got to try a few routes that end up in dead ends before we try the one which really works. So I think that's something which we'd like to think a lot more about.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing point. And I want to stress that by talking about the syndicate radio network type structure, that is literally made in a proactive, positive way to build songs in a pace that's doing well with the audience. But in no way, I love to talk about this about our team. We are not gatekeepers. We don't want to fulfill a role of being gatekeepers and being judge and jury of whether we give up on a song. And that's why we're very careful not to, to pay attention to each specific playlist property and the listening behavior within there, to add a song and to decide when to remove a song. So we don't want to be, it's in our interest to want to break music. It's good for our company to be early on artists and to be supporting a wide array of things. So we're not quick to remove something just based on stark data and all these different playlists. But the balancing act is, if you want these drivers, if you want these playlist properties, whether it's a small mood playlist or a super huge hits playlist, you have to continually serve the audience of that playlist to keep them habitually coming back, so that you've got that big property that you can constantly drive streams through. So it's a balancing act. We don't want to keep a song in a playlist that's not performing well within that one little context too long, because then it starts to turn people off and they may go somewhere else.
No, that's right. I mean, of course, we're all working. Every song that we work is going to be a hit. You know that.
Right, exactly. But I think that's a beautiful point, that I'm one of the older guys, and I really resent the fact you put me between the two young guys. But I think I've been through so many different areas of the music industry that have been so dysfunctional, so difficult, seen artists lose deals, and seen, I've worked in studio labels, I've helped pick singles. This is the best time in the music industry by far that I've ever witnessed. And the reason that I say that is that I can speak on behalf of the Spotify curation team. We represent a bunch of individuals that have been through a lot of different areas of the business. And we believe in the democratization of songs getting to an audience. We want there to be large and tiny small cases of success stories through Spotify. It's the shortest distance from the minute a record is mastered to getting in front of over 100 million listeners globally that you can even imagine. I mean, I would never could have imagined how amazing that could be for breaking more music in the world. So the point is, it's in our best interest for the global team to be cooperating, for us to be using the data, for us to be interacting with you all, so that we can intelligently break all different types of music around the world in a strategic way that fits in with you, what your vision is. The thing that I love now about Spotify is that we really have all the portions of the company working together on the best performance level that I've seen since I've been here 4.5 years. Our artist and label services team is so intertwined with the curation team, and the messaging that we're sharing and the communication line to our team